welcome everybody for the fifth and final Somber Talks workshop, where I am going to be talking about what happens if you manage to pull off a miracle and you actually finish your story, and what next? What the heck do you do with this thing that you have written? Um, so a lot of people that are starting out writing, they focus and stress a great deal on getting it written, but that's actually only the first step. And all of the things that we've been talking about, where character and setting and world building and whatnot, all of that is actually just to make sure that when it comes to the second and third part, you don't have a lot of work to do. If you can get a lot of stuff right the first time around, it kind of saves you time the second time around. Now, nobody, nobody writes a perfect story first time. Um, I have met people that stress and go, it's not perfect. I can't be finished with it because it's not perfect. Um, Sorry, Mr. Perfect Person, but no story is ever perfect the first time you write it, and it's a really bad thing to kind of assume that unless it's perfect, you can't stop writing it. So we're going to go through the two things that follow up, editing and publication, what it when it's finally finished and all that. When it's all done, I'll take questions, and then if we have time, we'll see if folks want to do some workshopping stuff. It should be cool, I hope. All right, so, oh, come on. Next. All right. So as I was saying, very few stories are perfect the first time. Don't worry about getting a story perfect. Worry about getting a story done. Any story that is bad, that is finished, can be improved, but an incomplete story, you can't really do anything with. So you try your best, you try to avoid mistakes as you can, but above all, you want to finish writing and then to go back and fix it, than to just simply constantly quibble with a chapter and not finish with it. Once you're done with your story, you can then assess it, and you can go ahead and decide, does it need revising, does it need rewriting, and does it need copy editing? A lot of people think that editing is all the same thing, and in fact, it's a really different process than writing itself, which is a reason why a lot of writers have problems with it. Okay? Now, the reason why a lot of writers have problem with editing is a lot of writers want to edit as they write. You write a paragraph, oh, that's wrong, I need to fix it. Oh, you write another paragraph, oh, that's wrong, I need to fix it. Believe it or not, that is the wrong way to edit a story. The reason is that your brain has a creative process and your brain has a critical process. And when your brain is trying to do both at the same time, it ends up being crap. So it's really better to just simply write out the story, get it to the end, go back and fix it, than it is to constantly be trying to put out a perfect product on the first pass. Just setting yourself up for lots of frustration and decision. Two books that I will always recommend is Elements of Style by Strunk and White, and the book Eats, Shoots, and Leaves. These two books are critical for a editor, or for anybody that is writing, let alone anybody who has to do any editing. Elements of Style is essentially every single grammar punctuation rule in the English language. It's for both English and it's also for British English as well. So it's a very book. It will tell you how you use that apostrophe correctly, whether it's possessive or not. And it will tell you how you are actually supposed to use commas and what happens when you put commas in the wrong place. Because it's the difference between eating with grandma and eating grandma. It makes a big difference when you get all of these elements correct. Uh, a lot of writers sometimes just say, "I'm not going to edit." They just finish a story, put it out, and if it's crap, it's crap, and they move on. Uh, you can do that. There's nothing stopping someone from putting out an unfinished product, but mistakes really jar a reader. It's really hard to get immersed in a story or to really get involved in a world when you're constantly dealing with punctuation mistakes, especially when they're systemic. Um, like, I have a issue where I will very frequently finish a line of dialogue with a period rather than a comma, um, followed by a he or she said. That's wrong. It should end with a comma, then he said or she should, and um, but there were people that would just point that out. It's like if you have a period there, you don't need the said tag put to it. Um, so yeah, it's something that I struggle with, and lots of writers struggle with, and we're actually going to be talking about finding people to actually do your editing for you. But if you feel frustrated by editing, if you feel intimidated by editing, you're not alone, but it is a skill that you can learn. You just have to learn how to do it right. Oh, come on. Browse mixed. All right. So there is no such thing as the 100 guaranteed best way to edit. Everyone is going to come up with their own process. As long as it's consistent, it catches mistakes, and it works for you, then that's fine. Don't fret about doing editing right. Just try to get it as best as you possibly can. One of the most important things that you can do to help you edit is to give yourself a cool down period. When you're editing something and it's fresh in your mind, it's really hard to shut off the little autocorrect in your brain that goes, oh no, it should have been this way, it should have been that way, and essentially keeps you from seeing your own mistakes. Because in your brain, you know what the sentence is, and it will actually fool your eyes so that what you think that you wrote isn't actually what you wrote. It's kind of fascinating just how your brain will shove that in because your brain knows how it's supposed to be. Um, so what some people like Stephen King or Mercedes Lackey like to do is they will write a story. It can be chapters or it can be a whole novel, depending on how fast you write. But once they're done with it, they will put it in an envelope, a manila envelope, and they will put it somewhere where they are not going to look at it for the next like 3 months. And they start writing something else. They work on the next story, or they work on a story, or they just work on something else. Then they go back to that after 3 months. They go back to that original story and they go through and they read it for the first time as if they are a reader, not a writer. And because your brain is no longer in that creative mode, you've given it time for all the ideas to clear out. You can now see all of the mistakes that you've made in that writing. This is one reason why I have a really difficult time reading my own story, Project Horizons, because as I'm reading it, I'm going, oh no, I want to fix that. I want to change that. I should fix that. That would be tighter. That would be better. I could put there. And I'm sorry, I can't do that for a story as big as Horizons, especially one that's now in print format. I just can't do it. Um, but if your story is of a much more sane size, you can. Um, and some writers will actually write story A and edit story B, but because it's a different story, they can actually shoot with their time. Um, so cooldown periods are good. Just don't let them be like inactive periods. Do something while your brain is cooling. Um, Even if it's writing the next chapter or something else, it is a way to just make it easier. Another really great trick for editing is to read your story out loud. The reason why is because the process in your brain that handles sight is different from the process in your brain that handles sound. And so when you read a sentence, your eyes can go through your brain and go, oh, yeah, this is fine. It's okay. I'm not going to see any. But when the phrase is read out loud, you may pause and go, wait a minute, that sounds stupid. And you go back and then you fix it so that now it actually sounds better. It's especially critical for dialogue. Um, when you hear a lot of really bad dialogue, very frequently it was just written on a page and nobody actually read it out loud. So you end up with these phrases that just don't seem to make sense. They don't sound natural. Um, the final recommendation that I would make is if you have a printer and you're good with paper and you recycle your paper, and I know you all do, um, print out a hard copy and edit the hard copy. One thing that this does is it gives you a record of things that you have changed that you can go back and reference. Um, when you do your editing on the word processor without that hard copy, sometimes you can lose track of what you've haven't corrected. But if you just print out what it is you're editing, go through, make those changes that you need changed, make the notes that you need did, it's a lot easier than to go back and make those editing fixes. Um, Not everyone likes hard copy. Some people just they're like, I don't want to waste the paper. Okay, well, recycle it to the best of your ability. I know some people they print both sides, be as efficient as you can, um, but it is a more effective way of actually getting the story done. So those are three just recommendations that I always make for editing, for more effective editing. It'll save you a lot of headache in the long run. Oh, come on. So the first level of editing is the revision. And this is the crap, the story isn't working type of editing. Um, this is where you have your character and you've put them in the story and you realize that this character is horrible and everyone hates them. This is where you wrote a setting and you didn't think of a logical consistency, and so your fantasy continent has a population density less than Siberia. Um, these are things that happen, and essentially have to look at your story, think about what it is that you want to do in the story, and you tear it apart. Revisions are hard. Revisions can be everything from an entire novel to just a single character. But they have ripple effects. When you revise a chapter or a character or a scene, um, it can be a real struggle to catch all of the alterations that occur throughout the entire story. And very frequently, it's easier to rewrite a story than it is to try to catch and edit and work changes. When I was writing Horizons, I didn't like the first two chapters. There were things that I wanted to do that I didn't do, and little details that I wanted to put in. So I went back and edited just two chapters, the first chapter one and half of chapter two. Um, I created over 90 different errors in my story that we had to hunt down and fix. Okay, I think that would be enough, but no, because all the changes to those 90 changes that we made, the little references that now had to be altered, um, they too had created alterations. And so every now and then we would read through an older chapter and go, wait a minute, Blackjack didn't do this in Stable 99. She did something else. Oh crap, we've just found another echo. Um, and so you need to be careful when you're because you can set yourself up for a mess if you try to just excise a change in your story. Uh, but often it's necessary. If it's a choice between putting out a crappy story or doing the work to make the story worth reading, do the work. We all are experienced with games and with stories that just did that little extra bit of editing. Um, and if we would demand it of people who create stories, why wouldn't demand it of ourselves? Um, so yeah, just keep revisions in mind. They're hard. It's frustrating when you have to do that, but sometimes they are necessary. Um, and you know, sometimes there are revisions you can't do. Um, for example, when we were about halfway through Horizons, there was a talk to revise out uh, all of Lacune from the entire story, from beginning to end, and we just couldn't do it. Not, I did not have the mental wherewithal in me to make that change. Um, so yeah, there's some things that sometimes it's like, you know what, put this thing in and it's not working like I thought it would. Um, Sometimes you just have to grin and bear it. Next. All right, the rewrite. Believe it or not, you talk to some authors about rewriting, and they get this horrified look on their face, like, wait a minute, I just spent a year writing this story, and now you're telling me you want me to rewrite it. Yes. If you ever plan on being a professional author, you will have to do rewrites. It is inevitable that you will have to rewrite things. A rewrite is different from a revision in that you're not making fundamental changes to the story. You're not changing out characters. You're not changing out scenes. You're essentially going through and rewriting it so that maybe dialogue flows better. Maybe events are a little more, maybe the description is a little more specific. Uh, Rights are inevitable, especially plan to be kind of a professional function. They are mandatory. You will have people that will say, "Yeah, that's wonderful. Rewrite it," and you'll have to do it. It's not personal. It's not a reflection of you being a crappy writer. It is just very simply something that all authors have to do from. Um, so when you are doing rewrites, one of the most important things that a rewrite will do is cut out stuff that you don't need. Um, all stories have fluff, and some stories have an exceptional amount of fluff. Stuff that is like, oh, I wanted to immerse my reader in this world. Oh, I wanted this character to have a little more development. Um, but it all boils down to, does it serve the story? And if the answer is no, you're probably better off taking it out. A lot of people like to criticize Horizons for being, oh, it's all fluff. It actually isn't. Um, Most things in the story are talking about some plot element or another that affects the ultimate outcome of the story. It's just you have to go a million words before you finally get there. Uh, if I were to try to do a rewrite of Horizons, I would significantly tighten up some of those events, um, but I couldn't just take them out. They need to be there. There's only a few bits of self-indulgence where I went, you know what, I really like this. I'm keeping it in. Um, but yeah, it's a challenge. A phrase that a lot of people will hear is the phrase "kill your darlings," because you may love a sentence, you may love an introduction, you may love a character. Um, if it doesn't forward the story, take them out. Uh, and as a author, I have made mental justifications for my darlings. I'm not an unbiased person when it comes to my darlings, but do have to pick what ends up in your story and what doesn't. And the last part. So, copy editing, aka the grammar Nazis were right. So, copy editing is what you do when all of the revisions and rewrites are finished. Um, and so you essentially have this story, you've revised it so that all the parts in it match the story you need, you've rewritten it so that all of the parts are nice and tight and coherent. But there are these things called periods and commas and apostrophes and spacing and all of these things that, if done wrong, will make even the best story unreadable. Um, and copy editing is basically one of the clearest signs between an amateur work and professional work. Copy editing is money because when you have tons of errors, it just makes it look like you've produced a really sloppy product. Um, and while it would be, wonderful if every audience is forgiving about, a misspelling or a typo here or there, the reality is you have about 5 or 6 errors before a reader will stop reading a story because the interruption to the thought process of reading is jarring to the point that the disinclined to continue. Um, and yeah, I do it myself. I'll be reading a Terry Pratchett novel and I'll be like, oh, that's an error. Now, it's one error in an entire novel, so I'm good with it. But if it was like 5 errors in the first chapter, why would I keep reading? Um, Copy editing is expensive if you have to pay for it. But if you are someone or you know someone who is a good copy editor, they are worth their weight in gold, and I am not lying here. I actually looked into what it would have cost me to copy edit Project Horizons if I had to pay the market rate for it, and it came out to about $250,000. It is not a cheap endeavor, but it is vital to a professional product. Um, so yeah, it's something that you can go back and learn yourself, but it does matter. And if you think it doesn't, um, you're essentially pigeonholing yourself into the amateur category. You'll still get readers. You'll still have people that enjoy reading your stuff, but you'll never actually be able to take that next step of being considered a um, and it's a lot of work, and often it's the work of multiple people. So, all right, I'm for some reason it just keeps clicking off. Next. All right. So I'm pretty sure that at least one person in this room or the stream has said this exact sentence. I can't do editing. Please help me. If you can get an editor, it is a privilege. It is a wonderful thing to have other people that will give you their opinion, their time, their consideration to make your writing better. Uh, it can be anyone from a parent to a friend to a spouse to um, even a critic can become a editor if you engage them correctly. Uh, please respect people that do this for you. Um, if you have deadlines, meet them. If they make requests, please follow them. Um, really work with them. It is a very important partnership to cultivate. Rather than to just simply go, oh yes, well I'm a great writer, so clearly people need to write for me. That is an attitude that will do you no favors. So if you do find someone that is willing to do it, make sure that they know that you appreciate their time, that you appreciate their effort. And if it becomes a burden, drop it because you can always do your own editing. It sucks. It sucks a lot. I hate doing it myself, but but you can do it. Okay, so there's really no excuse where, oh, I hate editing. Well, duh, every writer does. Um, you still got to do it. Uh, Now, sometimes you'll get a person that's really enthusiastic about editing, and they won't be a good editor. Like they don't have a understanding of grammar, they don't have the spelling. Be very kind and use them for a pre-reader to kind of help you get that criticism and building. Um, but if someone's giving you bad advice for editing, um, just be upfront and let them down gently. Just give them a role that is not something as vital as copy editing. Not all editors are the same. Some editors will give you great revision ideas, like, oh, have you thought about making the character more like this, or have you thought about doing that? Other editors are Nazi or are grammar Nazis, and they are wonderful people that will catch every comma and punctuation error, but they really couldn't care less about the overall story. Um, Use editors to their strengths. Don't just insist on making all different aspects of editing. Um, when it comes to some editors are toxic. There are unfortunately individuals in this world who you ask them for help and they seem to take that as permission to essentially take over your story. And they will basically go, oh, yes, well, you asked me for help, so clearly you must do everything I say. Um, it's your story. And so while it's a partnership, it's also a partnership on your editor's end as well. And if you have an editor that is being abusive, that is, demanding more of your time than your is demanding money that you didn't do up front, you have a toxic editor on your hands, and you might have to just simply terminate that relationship to find one that can help you out better. A toxic editor can ruin a writer faster than anything. So when you see it start to happen to you, don't just kind of suffer through it. Either resolve it, where you make it clear that it is your story. They are helping you. You are grateful for their help, but it is your story. Um, and if they can't respect that, you might have to let them go. Not all people will be your perfect editor. Um, And yeah, lastly, it will cost you if you have to buy editing, especially copy editing. Um, the going rate, I think, was something like about 10 cents to 12 cents a word for copy editing. Um, so you multiply that, and you get to some really, really in, or sorry, per 100 words. Um, but you'll get to some really, really steep prices over time. But it is available, and it is actually something I recommend if you ever are doing like college papers and you can afford it. It does put a bit of polish on that last bit if you're not a good editor to hire somebody to do, because if hiring them, you can demand excellence. Uh, Begging for editing. Okay, I think that's it though for editing. I think. Okay. So this is where I'll take questions for editing, any of the aspects of editing, finding editors, uh, any of this bit. So if there's any questions, now would be the time to post them. And if not, then I'll just move on to the second half.
Um, Wait, what would you suggest, like, finding editors for fan fiction?
Whatever site publishes the fan fiction will usually have some kind of a will usually have some kind of a forum that allows other editors. You might get lucky and find a looking for editors thread where people will post editor or will post their interest in editing. That is one advantage to writing in fan fiction is that there's a community of people that are interested in stories that are set in that world, and so you have a slightly better chance of finding someone who's willing to do editing for you. Um, Again, be aware willingness is not competence. Um, it's great if someone is willing to edit for you. Just make sure that they're doing good editing for you. Um, I know that FimFiction has an editor looking for editors thread, and I actually got very lucky with how I got my editors. So it's uh, it's a bit of a struggle. It can be done though, and fan fiction is a little easier. Once you have people willing to edit for you, though, um, sometimes you can get them to edit things that are non-fan fiction, and it's always nice when you can actually pull that off. Anybody else? Going once, going twice.
Let me check the stream. That's what I'm trying to do, but it's loading slowly.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, there's nothing in there.
Nothing to stream. Okay. And now, editing is not sexy. All right. So now the last bit, publication. What do I do with it when it's finished? It's astonishing how many authors don't actually think about this step. Um, because a lot of authors just get to the writing stage, get bogged down, and don't finish. But it does bear in mind to have an idea of what you're going to have this story do when you're all finished with it. Um, so the very first thing you kind of need to determine is who do you want to see it? Like if you want to the entire world to see it, then great, wonderful. Show it to the world, and the world will judge. If you're lucky. Sometimes you show it to the world, and all there are crickets, and it's like, but my story, isn't there people that are willing to read it? Not necessarily. Um, if you plan on controlling who sees it, there's going to be some hoops depending on where you put it or what you do with it. And if you want to get money out of your story, you've got some work ahead of you. It's always awesome to get any money out of your writing that you can. Uh, but if you have dreams of living off of your writing, you're probably going to be disappointed. Um, the vast majority of authors out there have day jobs. And if they make any money from their writing whatsoever, it goes to a vacation fund. Um, it is not something that occurs. It's very rare that you will ever have an author that's able to get money enough to live on just out of their writing. Can happen, but it's kind of like winning the lottery. Um, some skill involved, but lots of other things.
You better be J.K. Rowling.
Yeah, J.K. Rowling was an interesting case in that she was picked up by Scholastic, and so the publisher basically had a financial incentive to market her book, and did very excellent marketing for their age group. Scholastic does a lot of books for grade schools, and Rowling knew that she wanted her books marketed to a young adult audience. So it was a very good match for her. And then she was able to essentially parlay that story into a wide variety of different, money making formats. And she's set. Um, Anything she writes from this point on doesn't matter if she can write for fun if she wanted to. Um, so anyway, it's just not very likely to happen. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of skill to be able to live off of your writing. Oh, come on. All right. So when most people think about publishing their story, they generally think about publishing in paper print. Um, this is the magazines, this is the book formats that most people are familiar with. Uh, you essentially submit it to a publisher, and the publisher puts out the book. Um, so if you want to have your book published, you need to understand that it is a very, very tight market. Um, they very rarely will take a chance on an unpublished author. They will very rarely take a chance on an unrepresented author, and some won't. Some will be like, unless you've written something for us before, we're not going to even look at your writing. Don't even try. Don't take it personally. Just find a different publisher. Larger publishers have the luxury of taking a chance on your writing. So when you locate that publisher, whether it's like Del Rey or Tor, you will find on their website submission guidelines. Follow their submission guidelines to the letter. If they require a cover letter, write a cover letter. If they require only the first 4 pages, send them only the first 4 pages. If they require the entire finished manuscript, send them the entire finished manuscript. Very few places do that, by the way. Usually what the process is you will submit a cover letter that will be essentially a synopsis of the book. It is not who you are. They don't care who you are. They care about the story that you are selling them. Then it will be generally the first chapter, or occasionally the first 3 chapters. Um, what essentially happens is if you follow all of the guidelines, your book is sent to that publisher and it is put in a stack of manuscripts called a slush pile. And when they have free time and nothing to do, they will send an intern to go through and pick up, 5 or 6 manuscripts out of the slush pile, and they will start checking the very first page to see if you have followed their guidelines to the letter. If you haven't, they will throw it out. And believe me, um, get submissions that uh, boggle the mind. Um, I worked for a college publication paper uh, for 18 months, and we got submissions that were written in crayon by 12-year-olds, or by not 12-year-olds, by 6-year-olds. We got books that were handwritten on with pencils. We had books that had no editing whatsoever, no cover letter. We had cover letters that were biographies that were relevant to what the story was. Um, and you take one look at that, and it goes in the garbage. If you're lucky, you'll get a form letter saying thank you for your interest, but very frequently just thrown away. Because quite honestly, publishers can have hundreds to thousands of manuscripts in their slush pile. And sometimes they'll just see the slush pile is too big and they'll shred them all and refresh it. So if your manuscript, if you send a manuscript to a publisher and you don't hear anything from them, don't assume that they hated your story. Um, that certainly could be the case. Just understand they are deluged with submissions for stories, um, and it's very rare that they will take a chance on a story. If that intern, that first read, sees something that they like, they will then forward it to a content editor who will essentially read like the first or not the first paragraph, but the first 3 or 4 chapters. And if they like it, they will generally then contact you and say, "Hey, this is kind of interesting. We want to take a look at the rest of it." And they'll tell you the format to submit it in, whether it's an electronic format, mailing them a CD, mailing them a zip drive, sending it all in a PDF, whatever. They will ask for the book in that format. You do it. Don't send them a bunch of paper if they don't want a bunch of paper. They have their way of doing it. Respect their way of doing it. Um, you will also look at, or when you're also looking, you will see whether or not a publisher will accept a solicited or an unsolicited manuscript. If it says we do not accept unsolicited material, don't bother. Their business policy is we don't accept people we don't know. Um, you essentially will need an agent at that point because the publisher knows the agent and will work with that agent in order to make sure that they're only looking at stuff that's worthwhile. They basically give a lot of the responsibility to the editor or to the agent to make sure that it's good and worthwhile. So yeah, agents are essentially middlemen. Um, and on the subject of agents, because sometimes people will ask about this, agents are not paid by you. Okay, an agent is paid by the publisher. The money goes from the publisher to your agent, and that is where how the publisher or the agent pays their bills. If you contact an agent and that agent says, I require $200 a month to market your book, move on. Because the agent has zero incentive to market that book if they are an agent at all. They essentially can collect your money as much as possible. Um, and many do. There are many literary agent scams out there where they will say, yes, we require $40 a month or $200 a month or $1,000 a month. And they'll claim to be in contact with all of these publishing houses, and they will guarantee you that they can get your story published in as little as 3 months or 6 months or however long you're willing to strung along. A legitimate agent is paid by the publisher, not by you. You are paid by the publisher as well. And if you have a publisher that demands money up front, that's something called vanity press. Um, if you are going to explore getting an agent, they also have very strict guidelines. Some are open to just, manuscripts from anybody. Others will be very similar to a publishing house where they're like, I only want the first 3 pages in a cover letter. That's it. Don't send me anything else. I don't want to deal with the paper. I don't want to deal with the mess. Um, Follow their guidelines like they're gold because it's annoying to have a very simple rule like no handwritten submissions, and then people submitting stuff um, and their handwriting is horrible. Okay. Um, so next bit about publishing it yourself. So vanity press is when you essentially do not want to deal with a publisher. Um, there are a wide variety of vanity presses out there that will print whatever you want in whatever format you want. The Fallout Equestria's books are effectively vanity press stories, where somebody went to a publisher and said, or to a printer and said, "Please print this book," and the printer printed out as many copies, and they sold them at cost to avoid being sued by various legal individuals. The problem with the vanity press is that it is all on you. You're responsible for the money, you're responsible for the bookkeeping, you are responsible for the shipping, and it can get a little overwhelming. Taylor, the man who does the Schlock Mercenary comics, um, he started offering printed books, and he wrote about just having to warehouse um, Schlock Mercenary books because you order 2,000, you hope you sell 2,000, but you end up only selling 200. And now what do you do with 1,800 books? The plus side to doing a vanity press is you keep all of the profits. You don't have to share anything with a publisher. Um, Essentially, if you do really well, you can direct market that book and with word of mouth and a good social media campaign, you can essentially break even. Maybe even make some profit. Who knows? It is an option though, but it is a lot harder than some people think. And occasionally, there are some authors that are like, I will print like 3 copies. That's actually more expensive, but sometimes you just want your writing, physical tangible. All right, so e-publishing. If you ever gone to Amazon to their Kindle section, you will discover e-publishing, where essentially a book is put into a format that can then be purchased and read on a reader, whether that's a Kindle or a Nook or what have you. It is a little trickier to do because you have to make sure that you get the format correct for the software that runs the publication. Um, it is somewhat standardized, but certain companies like Barnes and Noble will require you to use their proprietary software. And I believe Amazon is actually doing the same thing too. So just investigate whatever platform you want to sell it on to see what kind of programs they are going to have you use. Now, you will have huge competition because the bar is so low to do e-publishing. Really, the publisher has no incentive to screen for quality. Um, they just simply will take your money because you actually have to pay to have your book put up for Amazon. They'll take a cut of the profits as well, but it's a small fee for admission. But once they have that, they'll just keep it on there forever. So your story will be in competition with Sasquatch, sex fetish novels. So bear that in mind when you think, oh, I'll just publish it on Amazon. You're going to be in some pretty steep competition. And sorting algorithms can really make or break you. Like if you do not start attracting web traffic in the first month, their algorithms will assume, well, this is a bad story and start pushing you down and down search lists. So, you may have to do some marketing on your own to some online web presences, some podcasts, in order to kind of play up your book to make sure people are searching for it, which bumps it up the algorithm. There's a whole science behind manipulating algorithms to get people more likely to buy your book. It's a challenge, but it's essentially a way that an individual can make decent money, and it's very low maintenance. It's very easy access. You don't have to worry about the format because if you get the format wrong, it won't work. And once it's up there, it's up there. So it is something to explore. Just kind of be aware of the programming requirements for the format. Blah 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 blah. Ooh. All right. Online. Hey world, here's my story. Congratulations. This is essentially what film fiction is. You are simply uploading a story to a website to be viewed, and you find the one that fits your story. So in the case of My Little Pony, most of it goes to film fiction. There's not really a reason to go elsewhere because that's where the most viewers for fan fiction go. Other places that are online that you can upload for free, like fanfiction.net, can be done, or you can just create your own website and put your money and put your story on the internet.
Have you heard of Archive of Our Own?
Archive of Our Own? It sounds
Yeah.
vaguely familiar.
Basically, some crap went down for fanfiction.net, so they created this new thing called Archive of Our Own, which is a place to post, like, fan fiction with no rules, or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to sign up to get on there and then wait a week before they accept you in.
Okay. Um, so yeah, I mean the options are many. Some are on websites that are owned by other people, but you can honestly get a GoDaddy account and spend the money to make your own web page, put all of your own writing on it. Um, it can be very difficult to get money out of online publishing. Uh, the reason is that very simply, it's very easy to steal writing and to simply distribute it. Or if you try to put something behind a paywall, people will generally just move on rather than paying the money in order to get that next little bit. Um, so if you're going to be trying to make a living off of online publishing, a few websites have done it. There's a story called Worm. That is sort of the textbook example for how they do it, where they offer the story free up to a point, and then you can essentially buy access to the most recent chapters. That story is actually finished, and they're now working on a sequel doing similar form. Another way is with Patreon and other donation websites, where you essentially put out a story and you say, hey, if you like my writing, I would really deeply appreciate it if you could support me by donating some money. It's a big world out there, and there's people, donate, $5, and they are wonderful people. Sometimes Patreon, you can devour your life, where you essentially are you're incentivized to create rewards. The problem is that the rewards will eat up time, and so very frequently you can find yourself just consumed with, oh, I need to do these for my rewards, and oh, I run out of time and I no time to actually do the writing that I want to do. It is a way of getting money. It does come with complications. My Patreon has saved my life. I probably would have died not been for my Patreon supporting me back when I was writing. Um, PayPal is another way of support. Uh, Someone just wants to make like a time donation, they can do it with PayPal. Um, and it makes a big difference. If you are a avid reader and you come across a story that's you really like, one of the best things you can do to support that story and keep it going is to give the author money. It sounds, I know there's that sounds coarse, but it really is a big support to a author to know that what they are creating is worth someone's donation. Um, so yeah, so if there's a reader that you really love, just say, hey, do you have a PayPal account I can send some money to? And that reader or sorry, that author will appreciate it. They damn well better. um, let's see. I think I'm almost done. Screenwriting, yes. So some people will look at their story and go, hey, this would be great on Netflix. Okay, so television and movies are big money, and breaking into screenwriting almost always is going to require an agent of some sort if you're going to be breaking into streaming services or just out and out television. Um, it's an extremely competitive field. It can be an extremely rewarding field, but it takes a lot of work, and it can take an entire lifetime to try to break into it. Um, you will very likely, if you plan on making a career of it, you'll probably have to relocate to a city like LA, Atlanta, or Toronto. You'll also need to learn how to screenwrite. Or not, they are not the same as writing a novel. Um, Screenwriting is a very specific format with very specific spacing, um, usually emphasizing things that the actor or the camera have to do, as opposed to trying to give the reach in their head. It essentially is a blueprint for making that story, and um, you will very likely have to relocate because if someone needs an editing, you will have to be on hand to make those edits and get them put out as quickly as possible. Um, Screenwriting is done on a wire, and it is very quickly. If you cannot keep up, if you stress, um, reputation is everything when it comes to screenwriting. Who you know is critical. And if you develop a negative reputation, you will very quickly find yourself shut out of that industry because there's so much money involved in television and movies. So bear that in mind. It is possible to turn your story into a movie, into a series, but it's difficult. Something that I don't have here is online animation is becoming increasingly a thing where amateur animators and artists will take a story and they will put it up on YouTube or other streaming services. Um, it's a possibility. It's a little easier to access if you can find the animator on Reddit. Um, you can even do amateur films if you team up with some people doing like a film project out of a acting school. Um, there are other ways to break in. Sometimes you just got to get really creative with how you do it. But don't just think, oh, I wrote this story and it's a good story. Netflix is going to want to make a series off of it. No, Net, Net, Netflix has plenty of material to sift through. Um, and they generally only will accept agents that they know and trust. So bear that in mind. It is an option. It is definitely an option of what to do with story, but it's got a lot of challenges. There are entire classes that you can take at college for screenwriting and how to sell a screenplay. So a very uh, another one that is a possibility is game development. It's not impossible, but the bar is probably even higher than it is for screenwriting. Um, if you have think you have a good story for a game, probably one of the best things you can do is find other independent developers who are also interested in a game to develop. Um, Game design takes money, and it either takes sorry, game design either takes money, takes time. Um, if you want to get a game out in any kind of realistic, like 2, 3, 4 year process, it's going to cost money because rarely work for. However, there are a few games that can be produced by only one person that are very successful. Undertale is the poster child of this, where essentially one person took the time and used essentially a RPG Maker to craft a story that has made that person a millionaire. Um, it is possible. It just took that person, like, I believe, 2 to 3 years of development time for Undertale. Um, and Minecraft, I'm less familiar with, but yeah, the original Minecraft was done by one person. Um, so it can be done. It just takes a lot of passion to carry through to make your game into a story. Um, the alternative way is to get in laterally. Learn professional art skills and coding skills, and you basically say, I'll do coding for you, or I'll do art or animation for you. Um, but I'm interested in getting into story design, into narrative design, character design, world design. Uh, that is a way to get your foot into the door and to get yourself onto a professional team. But be aware that it's hard, depending on who you're working for. There are unfortunately companies that are very predatory when it comes to developers, and you may not find the process to your liking. So just bear that in mind that when you are thinking, hey, I want to do game development, it's a little trickier than just taking your story and plugging it in. Even if it's a great story, it can be a struggle. Um, all right. So the last bit is just keeping it for yourself. You're not required to publish your work. You can keep it for yourself. You can keep it for your loved ones. Um, it's just very nice to have a hobby that you enjoy, that brings you enjoyment, but also be able to get some living money out of it as well, even if it's only a couple $100 a month. Um, for a lot of people, that's way better than a poke in the eye. Oh, I actually just thought of one other thing you can do. So if you happen to know an artist, um, and you're both interested, you can also do a webcomic. Um, Webcomics are also a very interesting creature in and of themselves, in that they seem to take way more time than most people realize. But if you have a artist that likes doing art and likes your story, and if you're willing to try to think of how to story put your story into art, um, you are able to put out a product that hopefully people like. Uh, Typically, webcomics are on the donation side of funding, so Patreon than a paywall. But it's something to do, and if you enjoy the process, hey, why not? Some very famous, very successful webcomics were just the product of a writer having a story idea and uh, some art skill. All right, and I think,
Yeah, like romantically apocalyptic.
yeah, I know that story has gone places. That story has wandered off into the antipodes of
He
conceptualism.
completely refined and like redid the entire beginning so it makes more sense now.
I don't think it's possible for that story to make sense. That story is whew, getting on the metaphorical side of things. Freefall
It's
is a
always been metaphorical.
yeah. Freefall is a excellent one as well. That's actually one that I've mostly. It's amazing how a web like 50 and it's still only in world. Um, Not counting the current time skip. Two Kinds is a very famous one. A lot of people have read, where you can see the art evolve over time. Others, like Questionable Content, you can actually see how the art has evolved. Where in that case, he didn't have an artist. He just said, "Okay, I'll just start doing the art myself. How hard could it be?" And if you actually follow the webcomic through all 3 and you can actually see just how much the art has evolved over time. Something that can be done. Just takes passion. It takes passion. It takes discipline. It takes feedback, and it's a bit of a challenge. Whew. So that's it. Uh, Thanks so much for coming. Thank you, Piper. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. If you have any linens to spare, please consider donating to her, because she has been financing all of my slides. And so I really, really would like to just point out how much work that she's done for this workshop and presentation. Um, so this is the chance for last questions and comments, and if also folks are concerned, I can also answer what I know from a legal perspective as far as copyright is concerned. So yeah, what questions do folks have? This is your last moment for questions, or forever hold your peace.
Let me check the live stream.
Uh-huh.
Nope, there's no questions in the live stream. stream, it looks like.
Your silence is your doom.
No, it happens. I love questions. I love answering questions. But no, it happens.
I've got one about Patreon. If you go down the Patreon, if you go down the, I think I'm saying it wrong. I'm conscious of how I say it now. If you go down Patreon route, is there a way of balancing out how you both like if people who are paying to you and then also writing? Good way to balance.
It depends. One version of a Patreon is called a tip jar, where you just please whatever you can donate is wonderful. Others try to do specific rewards. I tried to do that and it failed miserably. For all my Patreons, I love you all so much. But I was not able to write and actually keep up with the reward. So my Patreon is effectively a jar at this point. I've just been very, very fortunate with some of the Patreons that I've gotten over the years.
Can I add something real
Mhm.
quick? Another thing that could really help you with getting yourself out there and interacting with your fan base and making sure it's healthy and grows is actually just getting a Discord and attaching your Patreon to that. There's a lot of people who really like your work that will just happily throw a couple bucks color in your Discord, and you can find it pretty easy to take care of and help out your entire community that way. Discord's probably the best thing that ever happened to me because it helps me like with everything, like having everybody all in one place, getting events out there and projects, and people see it just right as soon as it comes out, and it's like nothing else has been quicker than that. So I highly recommend if you have a Patreon and you are an artist or a writer or anything like that, definitely have a Discord dedicated to your work and the community that follows you. It'll grow over time, and you guys can grow together.
As far as Ko-fi and other donation services, it's whichever one you like. Patreon is currently
That's
the most
something
well known.
that's unique to the past few.
Sorry, what was that, Pepper? You cut out.
Did I cut out? Oh,
Yeah.
I was just saying that you should. Am I robotic or something?
No, you good?
My internet's really bad. I was just saying, definitely get a Discord and make it for your community. So I have like Art of Brainiac, and there are other like artist friends and writer friends that I have who have similar things, and it's really, really good. So you should definitely test it. It's like something that's really unique to the past few years.
Okay, but then as far as other services, I've never used them. I know that some people don't like Patreon. They don't like the fees that Patreon takes out. You just simply have to find one that you like that people are willing to donate to.
Okay, cool.
Other questions, comments, concerns? I love questions. Nope. Going once. Going twice. Going 3 times. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay.
So what's your biggest regret?
My biggest regret?
Yeah.
About what? Writing or?
Yeah, about writing.
My biggest regret was that I did not package Project Horizons into 3 novels instead of just writing one massive novel. Project Horizons is actually 3 stories crammed together, and quite honestly, they could have been independent stories, and I would have been better off. But you live and learn, and I'm trying not to write another Project Horizons with Homelands, but that's what happens with serial publication, is it tends to start getting.
Project Horizons is chunky as frick.
Yep, but here's the funny thing. I was actually looking at Homelands because I wanted to put in a scene where Scotch Tape is being trained on combat with Blackjack. And I'm looking at the story and I'm like, there's no real fluff opportunity just stick her in because the story is so tight. And that's bizarre to say for a 1.7 million word story, but it's true. I had to basically put it in the time skip while Blackjack is in the core, and it was the only place to that that scene written. I was surprised by it. I thought, oh yeah, no, I can't put it here. Can I put it here? No, I can't put it here. Can I put it here? No, can't put it here. Um, it's really surprising. But you learn that when you're writing, and it's a challenge, but it's a lot of fun. It's really rewarding to get a story done and to get a story people like and actually see it out there. So yeah. Other questions, comments, concerns, criticisms?
Someone in the live stream said, "How do I trick myself into being passionate?"
How do you trick yourself into passion? Drugs. Wait, no.
That's the blackjack answer.
Well, it kind of works.
Passion is a very personal thing. Caring is an art, and some things that you care about grow tedious over time. Other things carry you through. For me, my passion was from readers. When I started putting out Horizons and people started commenting, I was a very shut-in person before I started writing Horizons. I did not have any kind of online presence. I did not, I didn't have much of a life at all. And when I started putting up other pony stories like Simply Rarity up on E, and people started to reply to it, I started to like getting that feedback. So I would put up a chapter, and then I would hope that people would post like a reading response reviews where they would read through it, and as they had thoughts or feelings, they would post it. And those were awesome. Those were great. When I actually got fan art of my story, it was a huge incentive to keep writing because I liked getting writing in a vacuum with no feedback is hard. Really got to love that story that you want to write and dedicate the time that it takes to make that story happen. And sometimes it just doesn't last. Sometimes you'll be like, I'd much rather play a game than write this story. And, that's how you stop being a writer. Struggle with that today, every day. So I wish that there was a magic pill that you could take and passionate over it, but ultimately it comes down to you, and it's not something you can take. Write it or you don't. And it's
Be
really up
careful
to you.
for being too passionate, though, or else you'll end up like me, and everybody will think you're a machine.
Yeah, that runs into the other side of the operation where it's like, oh, but you do so much and you do so much great work, and why can't you do my stuff? And it's like, because I don't care about your stuff. Sorry. No, it's complicated, but especially when you're doing commissions for other people. Anything else?
I had a question.
Yes.
When writing some of the darker parts of Project Horizon, how did that really affect your day-to-day emotional state, like having to write some of the really dark, depressing parts? And did that come from a place of wanting to bring light and empathy towards other people's situation, or did you two were going through something personal and wanted to bring that to your character to bring light to a situation of suffering?
So Project Horizons isn't dark to me. It isn't. People tell me that it's dark, and I go, really? What part of it is dark? And then they're like, let's see, play chapter 33, the ending. It's really funny when you're a creator in that because you're so immediate in the creation of it, you don't actually see how other people might take it. And so you can write something that just seems like purely natural to you because you know the whole story, and someone else is reading it for the first time, going, "Oh my God, what is wrong with this person?" Um, as far as the overall, narratives of, dealing with serious themes, I have a condition called dysthymia, which is essentially lifelong depression. Um, and it sucks. It's genetic, and deal with it. And it doesn't help that I went through some things younger in my life that have skewed my life towards more complications than I would like. Um, Again, I have to deal with it. But a lot of my life went into characters like Rampage, and um, you do what you got to do, and sometimes it helps, and sometimes it doesn't. But writing comes from you. That's what art is. I know. I tell people that I don't think Horizons is dark, and they just like, what? What is wrong with you? So, any other questions?
If I can comment on what you just said, is that all right?
Yeah, sure.
I recently asked a similar question to one of our local narrators here, and it was about where you find where you find the emotion to, for certain, for passages when you're reading. And he basically said to me that everyone has their poison and everyone has their prison. And what he meant was that everyone has a point in which what they're reading or what they're experiencing hits home, and at that point is when they really start to feel, and everyone's different. So
Oh, that sounds really really close to it. You cannot write something that is guaranteed to make everyone cry, uh, but you can write something that feels very real to the um, be responsible with that because it is a obligation and burden. It is not something to just be exploited at your amusement. You occasionally run into folks who are like, "Oh yeah, I make people cry because it's fun." I've been that person on occasion, but do try to avoid it. Respect your reader more than taking pleasure from any discomfort they might have. Anyway, so if there's no other questions about publishing, editing, copywriting, Horizons, anything at all?
I think I might have one more question for you.
Sure.
So, as a creator, there's always things that I'd like to do that are outside of my wheelhouse, like something that I'm like, God, I wish I could do X, Y, or Z, like electronic music or something like that. That's not something I usually do. Do you have a secret desire to write something strange, like a children's book or something like that?
A children's book.
Not necessarily a children's book, but just something different than your usual style.
So, I do want to write original stories. I am a huge fan of fantasy, science fiction. Um, Dark is kind of par for the course with my head. It is generally going to be something serious. I would really love it if I could write something just funny and silly and wacky. I can't do it. I overanalyze way too easily.
Hmm.
But no, there's been some times where I've dipped my toes into lyric writing, into songwriting. That's a whole different world of writing right there. Um, just trying to get the words to match, music is an incredibly involved process. Um, but the thing is that you get one life, and what you do with that life is up to you. And if you want to spend some of that life learning how to do electronic music, learn electronic music. What else is there to do with this time that you have here? Maybe you won't be awesome at it at the start. Maybe you'll get bored of it and move on, or maybe it will turn into something wonderful for you once you actually try it. It's easy for me to say, it takes work, but most worthwhile things do take work. So,
Thank you.
no worries. Let's see. Question. Now that you've experienced SL and a whole new level of communicating with your fan base, will you continue to enjoy SL or fall back into the abyss of reality? SL has been an interesting experience for me. I will probably come back from time to time. Some people have talked about actually making a formal writing workshop, like monthly thing possible. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what kind of a thing I would want to be involved with in that level. It would probably be much less talking and much more critiquing if I were to do that. Because as you've noticed,
We can
I
work
have
together on that, honey.
yeah, as you probably noticed, I am stalling because my brain is not on a lot of sleep right now. But it's a possibility, and we'll see what the future brings. But I'm friends with Piper, and she's very good at dragging me into doing things. So there you go. Ooh.
Kicking and screaming.
Yes, kicking, screaming with tears involved. It might also be, a good thing just to keep just the pony fandom going. I'm like it to go as long as possible. And I know that all good things come to an end, but I don't want it to end just yet. So.
I mean, I think we'll be okay. Star Trek's still going.
True. But then you have, is it the Kelvin timeline or the original timeline? And then someone mentions Picard, and suddenly everyone loses their minds. Because people talk about whether Klingons are actually the Klingons in Discovery or whether there's some other alternative universe Discovery Klingons. And then there's talks about mutants and what mutants were actually...
Yeah, that'll be us after G5 comes out.
The horror. I can only hope. I can just hope.
We'll just be like, G4 is superior
Yeah, no, who knows? It's all opinion. My big concern is 5 gonna have the characters and story that 4 had? 4 was very elegant in its premise, where it's just like, yes, there's this world of ponies, and friendship is magic. Let's look at friendship and let's look at magic. I think that if done right, it could be an awesome thing. I think if done seriously, it could be an interesting thing. But I think that if they take it in a silly, low production direction like Ponies Live, it will just not.
Yeah, from what I understand, they're going for the Steven Universe fan base with Generation 5, based on what some things have said, but we will see.
That wouldn't be, a bad way of going with it. You have both My Little Pony ending, you had Steven Universe ending, and if you learn from the mistakes of both and the successes of both, you could some story. But if you try to get sloppy, if that don't really, you're going to have some very upset fans, and so we'll just see how it all turns out. Cross my fingers. Woo. All right. Any other final questions before I find out what Piper, put into my presentation? She always puts something in there.
It's just Solstice.
Oh, okay.
Sneaky, sneaky.
Sneaky, sneaky Kieran. Oh, but
I
she
thought
doesn't
about
have all...
including something else.
but she doesn't have a hole in her